Welcome back, everyone. Today is the day. Welcome to the third annual Tamer's Favorite Bowling Balls of the 2021 and 2022 season. And as I did last year, I will stick with the arsenal creation methodology to talk about my favorites. This way it makes it a little easier to follow. If you haven't watched the Arsenal Building 101 video that I put out recently, please do go ahead. I think it's crucial to help you understand how I'm going to frame this out. All right, let's get into the mid-late category. This should be the cleanest ball that responds essentially after the end of the pattern. Typically comes into play when the lanes break down and open up. You want stored energy for the punch and carry. I mean, in this slot, I would say is interesting for me. If you have a higher rev rate, you can get away with sort of weaker cores, very clean covers. For me, I still tend to prefer bigger cores in those cleaner covers, where the cover gives the length, but the core gives me that extra punch that I need. So, for example, I still have a Brunswick Melee jab that I enjoy in this slot, which I'll give an honorable mention, along with the Storm High Road Pearl. I tend to get a bigger motion with the jab than, say, the High Road Pearl. So I would choose between them depending on, say, the volume I'm bowling on. But let's get into what I'm going to call the top four for me in this category. So number 4 is the Motive Supra Enzo. And this ball was surprisingly versatile. It's a shined up infusion hybrid cover on top of the high impulse core, which again is on the bigger side. It's been sort of modified to have a higher RG, but whatever. It could rank higher, but there is something about the other balls that make me choose them more often on any given night. So number 4 is the Motive Supra Enzo. That takes us to number 3. Number 3 is the Roto Grip Rubicon UC2. This ball has a very traditional look, to the latent, booming, shiny pearls out of Utah. It fits pretty squarely for me here. And maybe, again, if you have more hand, this is a little bit upstream, but it fits pretty nicely here for me. And it's almost a toss-up between the UC2 and my number 2. My number 2 is the Motive Iron Forge. The Iron Forge has the same formula I mentioned at the outset, right? Clean cover, it gets a length, and that heavy rolling core, bigger core. And maybe for some, this and the UC2, again, could be upstream if you have a bigger hand, but great fits in this slot for me. The difference, I would say, between number 2 and number 3 is just, I would say a little bit more rolly nature of the Iron Forge. And probably Motive balls, especially the sort of pearl balls. And that just matches a smidge better for me. So that's it. Iron Forge is my number 2. Now, let's get to the number 1. The number 1 is the Storm Dark Code. Maybe folks were wondering why this ball, again, hasn't been mentioned yet. Maybe in, say, the mid-define category, similar as the other balls. But for me, the cover is so clean and the ball is way more controlled back end than I typically put in, say, like that mid-define shape, that it clearly downstream for me. Now, again, and maybe initially you might think, oh, it's not so good, but actually I think it's great. And while, it could be considered somewhat of a toss-up between the number 1, 2, and 3 slots, the Dark Code is something very different than the other 2 for me. Due to its added control, I feel, pretty comfortable bringing it frequently to sport shot patterns as well. And honestly, probably, to be fair, I would say it's even a little closer between the Dark Code and the Iron Forge for me in terms of that, which ones I might bring. But because it's, I would say, a 52-48 in favor of the Dark Code, that's what puts it in my number 1 slot. So that's what, that's what we have for the mid control. Okay, I just want to mention a couple of other balls that I do feel are noteworthy from my perspective for a couple of different reasons. First, the specialty. I'm just going to call one ball out, and that's the Motive Blue Tank. It is a urethane-like ball that has somewhat of a more traditional look that I have found useful for me from the modern crop of, urethane balls. Again, I don't have the rev rate where urethane typically comes into play. Say like as high rev rate guys use to control, fresh, tough shots. But in this case, really what I found is if I use a bit more surface than say the average higher rev bowler, I can get the very similar look. And the blue tank has been the one that I bring when I want to do that. So I got to give it a kind of a special mention here for the specialty category, the molded blue tank. Okay, last category. So if you held in there, I mentioned I was going to add another category. And this one is what I call the most underrated. Okay, so I'm just gonna, throw that out there into my favorites. And the winner here is the 900 Global Burner Solid. This ball is simply more than the sum of its parts. I mean, it's plain and simple. It hooks more than you would expect for the price. It has a lower diff, control type core, yet still hooks plenty. It confuses things because it actually fits quite easily in the mid-control category. The ball simply stands out because it has a reliable motion that is bigger than its price, and generally speaking is what I would consider a massive value. To my eye, it's actually one of my favorite motions. So, most underrated ball for 2021-22 is the 900 Global Burner Solid. Well, that's it. What do you think? What are your favorites? Just comment down below. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell to get notifications, like the video if you enjoyed the content, and we'll see you next time.